Yo, welcome everybody, and welcome to Weird Growth, the podcast where we listen to some of the strange and often really unexpected stories that come out of startup land. We listen to founders and their often squiggly line of growth. Today we are super lucky to have Iain McIntyre, direct from San Francisco, or Berkeley to be specific. Who is the co-founder of Humm, which is originally a Perth-based startup, now in the States. Welcome, Iain.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Thank you for being here, mate. It's great to have you here. Introduce yourself, please. Tell us about yourself, about Humm, what you're up to.
Sure, yeah. So a couple of years ago, myself and a couple other guys from here in Perth, who went to UWA and Curtin together, had graduated, or in my case, had nearly graduated, and had been doing our careers, or like getting ready to do our careers, for a couple of years, and had always kind of talked about how we didn't want to do that. We wanted to do something more exciting. We wanted to kind of like follow the Elon Musk trajectory, which is all panning out now, which is exciting.
Yeah.
But to build something from scratch that made the world a better place, that did it in a way that we cared about, and to master our own destinies. And what we ended up kind of like getting most excited by was neuroscience, this like final frontier of humanity, like introspection and changing ourselves is so much tied to our brains and the systems that they're connected to. And some of the things that we realized that you could do to yourselves with existing technologies called neuromodulation and other stuff just got us super excited. And we kind of like started the conversation around some research a long time ago, but then realized maybe actually we could do this as a business. And so we started this company, Humm, which is the company that I am the CEO of, and those guys are still all around. We're all now based up in Berkeley, in California, in the San Francisco Bay. And we make an innovative little device that adapts some of that technology that's existed for a while and has proven to be working in labs, but never really proven to be working for real people in the real world. And the way that we approach it is that we're making it easy to use and fun and engaging, and something that people aren't scared of, which has been a big problem. And that's what we do. We make little patches that make you learn faster.
Super ambitious stuff, and this neuroscience, all the sort of burgeoning industry that's starting to come up at the moment. There's a lot of skeptics out there as well. What gives you the energy or the motivation to go out and tackle this probably one in a million? A lot of people refer to Humm as a moonshot.
Totally.
How does that feel when you're out there trying to make this thing, which just seems so difficult to do? How does it feel taking on a problem like that?
Oh, it's invigorating. Yeah? I mean, we are so lucky, and I can't sit here and pretend that we're doing this because we're so much smarter than anyone else or more brave than anyone else or anything like that. The reason that we're doing this is we've had people support us to be able to do this, right? Okay. Like our parents who put us through college and school. And
sure.
All of those people who have supported us at this point have made this possible. But it's a scary but invigorating opportunity to work on something that no one's ever worked on before, and to potentially solve problems that no one's ever worked on before, because not only are we like in control of our own destiny, it's just such a cool technology that has potential to do such incredible things for people, healthy people, sick people, everyone. And so it's great.
Super exciting. Good on you, mate. That's and this is working in the field that we do. It's just a real privilege to work with young, energetic people who are out there taking a punt, having a go at changing the world. It's just so good to see, and it's a privilege to be a part of. So well done.
That wouldn't be possible without Ammo Marketing. So.
Oh, we didn't bring you in here for plugs, mate. But we did meet very early on in your journey, at Bloom at UWA.
Totally.
Do you remember those days? What was that like?
I remember the first time I saw you were presenting to the Bloom crew about pirate marketing. Yeah. Which kind of like pricked my ears up. Yeah. I like pirates.
Pirate metrics.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. It's come a long way since that. We learned a lot of the real fundamentals in our time in the Bloom ecosystem.
Yeah, how did it start? What was the very early? You were talking about it. There was ideas, but what was the first tangible step?
I guess it starts when we all met, and Ahmed and I met Ahmed, my co-founder, who's our chief product officer, met when we were like 12 years old playing soccer.
Yeah.
We just built a friendship around being two kind of like people from not like part of like the normal social crew. You know, you had like all the fit guys playing sport, and then Ahmed was an immigrant, a recent immigrant from Mauritius, and I was kind of like a nerd, and so we became friends. And Tim and I became friends in high school when Ahmed went to Aquinas. I followed him to Aquinas, and Tim was at Aquinas, and we just all started having like this like constant conversations about the stuff that excited us.
So it was always something was gonna happen at some point. You were just looking for what that was.
I think we were always looking to collaborate. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really kind of like we got the opportunity to do it though when Tim did some research in this area using magnets on the brain to help people with spinal cord injuries as part of a study.
Tim's a doctor?
Yeah. Tim was studying medicine, I was studying law.
Yep.
And Ahmed was studying engineering. And that experience was where I came in to be a participant in that study, to be like what they call a healthy control, someone who's meant to show what a normal brain's response is to something that's being developed as a medical treatment for sick people. They put me in this room, right? Tim didn't tell me much about what the study was going to happen, so I didn't really know what was going to happen. They put me in this room and they told me that they were going to shock my brain and that it was going to have a like response, and that they were going to measure the response.
Oh wow!
it was an interesting.
That's
experience.
just what you want to hear.
Yeah, they like wheeled in this big box on wheels that was plugged into the wall and made this whirring noise, and it was like, is that the thing that's going to shock me? I had.
Yeah.
And then they put this big circle on my head and counted down from 30, 29, 28, 20, all the way down to 0. And at 0, this whack noise happened, and then like my arms or my legs would just spasm, and it would be out of your control for a couple of seconds.
Whoa!
Yeah, it was crazy.
So this wasn't just like a placebo thing trying to get you to freak out and measure the response. It was legit.
No, they were moving the position of the electromagnetic field they were generating with this big, powerful electromagnet that they plugged in the wall, in a way that they were attempting to stimulate different nervous system responses and muscular responses. So they were looking at like if someone has a spinal cord injury that prohibits their arm working, for example, can we actually bring back that function with this magnetic stimulation of the brain?
Wow.
But to start off with, in the preliminary part of the study, you're just looking at can you actually put a field into that part of the brain, and does that connect to that part of the body? So that was just a conversation.
So that was your first sort of window into what might be possible in this kind of space.
For Tim, it was like a study that he was involved in.
Yeah.
That ended up getting published. For me, it was just this like really visceral introduction to technology that I didn't know existed, which was you can use external things to change what's going on in the brain in a way that can totally change your experience of life. And if it can move your arms and legs, maybe it can change your thoughts. Maybe it can make your emotions different.
Makes sense. Brains run on electricity, and your whole body's run on electrical signals.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay, and so, you've had that experience, and, with your mates, you sort of decide that we want to sort of progress. What was then the next steps to making this happen?
It was years.
Yeah.
Each of us kind of dabbled a little bit when we were at college. We all the three of us went to University of Western Australia, and our original co-founder Chris actually went to Curtin as well. I got involved in the club scene at university, social clubs, not like nightclubs. A little bit of nightclubs.
But kind of,
Yeah. Started a club with a whole bunch of other people called the Electronic Music Appreciation Society. It was kind of a combination of a party and a business.
The infamous EMAS.
Exactly, yeah. Running really big, like mini festival kind of things with production, and also running teams of volunteers and committees, and
I'm sure there was no modification of consciousness or anything involved in that particular.
Music is actually one of the best ways to modify consciousness.
Okay.
Some of the effects that Humm has can be in a similar way replicated with music. Yeah. So I could talk about that for a long time. But yeah, that was kind of my first foray into something other than law, which was kind of what my life was gearing towards.
Yeah. And did that sort of give you a bit more of an insight into business and running an organisation?
And actually I started a business out of it. I started a company called Icon Audiovisual, which is still going to this day, which is cool.
Yep.
Which did lighting, sound, production, staging, audio. That was kind of, very closely affiliated to EMAS. We did all the gigs. This
is a recurring theme with entrepreneurs like you, is that there's always, or very often at least, a number of projects and, in increasing levels of professionalism and and sophistication that people go on. It's very rare that the one that the project they hit out of the park is their first one. And there's this learning process that goes on, and almost a different mindset that people have in their entrepreneurial space.
And it was the same for all of us.
Yeah.
I mean, Tim ran the Surgical Society at WA while he was studying medicine, and he was involved in a lot of like fundamental scientific research, which is kind of how Humm started. And then Ahmed actually was in, as well as doing engineering, and then ended up in business and working for Macquarie Bank. He was one of the leaders of the UWO race car team. So it was that I saw in these guys. These guys were entrepreneurial in their own way. It's not starting little businesses and earning money. It's quite a different thing, but entrepreneurial in that they can like have a vision, get people around it, build a functioning organisation that satisfies that vision, and that's why we ended up working together. I think we were just magnetised to each other.
So the word Humm and Humm as a concept, as a business, when was that started?
We really started to talk seriously about this idea in end of 2015, beginning of 2016.
Okay.
So it had been just a conversation for a couple of years at that point, but we started to see movement in the space, particularly Tim. Tim's always been like the really focused person on the science here. Tim started to notice that some of the results coming out of labs, including the lab in San Francisco that we now work with, were just really exciting, helping people do things like learn faster. And whereas previously there had been some side effects involved in the industry, like, you know, if you put a battery on your head, some things might go up, some things might go down. There was this new technology that Humm now uses called transcranial AC stimulation, which is like a more sophisticated modulated electrical field. That didn't seem to, it seemed to be able to be more targeted. And so we were just like looking at those studies and just getting really excited. And we were like, actually, maybe this could be the time. Whereas previously it's been hackers playing with it, or medical devices that are expensive and therefore clinical purposes. And they often have a lot of downsides, like they're just scary, they're hard to use, etc.
So you saw this research starting to come out of labs and clinics and things, and you're like, okay, let's start moving on this. What were the first steps to start making this tangible?
Well, none of us knew how to. Well, we all had a bit of experience, you know, but this is such a different thing to start. This is a moonshot. This is a crazy business. This is a tech company. None of us were really prepared, so we didn't know how to start. So I think the first thing we started doing was just like meeting regularly and hacking the tools together and trying to show that we could build something to ourselves, I guess. It was the first person. We have all these funny videos of us in my warehouse for Icon Audiovisual, like strapping electrodes, like wires and stuff to our head. And,
oh man, we've got to see some of those.
Yeah, well, they're pretty funny. And like putting our brainwaves up onto the screen and then like meditating and trying to see, could we like measure and build an algorithm around when someone's focused and not. That was kind of the first thing we did.
Awesome.
But then we really started to hit go on it when we started telling other people, and other people started getting excited.
Yeah, right. That makes it a lot more real,
Indeed. And people started telling us that maybe we were actually a good team to work together on this kind of thing. So, like I said at the start, like we owe a lot to other people. It's not just our internal vision that caused this, but here, the place that we're filming this podcast right now, Spacecubed
in beautiful downtown Perth, Western Australia.
That's it. It was had been around for a while, but it was a pretty different thing back then. It was scrappier, smaller, less startups had really come out of it and succeeded at that point. But things like the startup weekend were happening, where you could come and just like meet people, and we thought, well, we'll go meet people who like made tech startups, and we'll learn from them, and then maybe we can get them excited about what we're building, and they can like help us with it. It ended up being a little bit different to that, actually. We ended up like participating in hackathons, not really meeting anyone who had the experience to work on the stuff that we were working on. So that part of it was unexpected. It didn't really work out, but what we did get was a lot of really like experienced tech and non-tech people giving us advice and making us feel like we knew a little bit, and maybe they could give us a bit more information, but we just should keep working on it until we like.
It's a really cool thing about this community is that there's a lot of people who are very generous with their time, and you know more than happy to help people out if they see that, you know, if they see that there's a young group of people who are, you know, motivated and are giving things a go and are willing to listen to advice. I think that's important.
Very.
You know, it's actually a really supportive community like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the first thing we did was the HBF hackathon, which is not a thing that ever ran again, but HBF
I remember that.
Gave a bit of money and support, and some of the executive came down and they tried to think about how they could invest in a couple of businesses that would like be able to do some project with HBF.
It was some sort of medical or health related angle on it. Yeah, cool.
And we won the Mentor's Choice Award.
Yeah.
So like a little bit like the consolation prize, but also kind of like this is cool, you should keep working on it, rather than this is the best idea I've heard yet. So that kind of just gave us the motivation, and also just like socialized our intent to do something here. Sure. And everything just kind of spiraled out of control after that. Yeah.
And then you got involved in Bloom up at St Catherine's.
Had kind of been like parallel involved in Bloom since the very start, because I knew the guy started it, Mike Shelton.
Yeah.
And he started as a UWA club around the same time that EMAS started really taking off. And so him and I kind of like always looked at each other at the guild meetings where we would have all the clubs together and be like, I want to work with that guy. And we even like talked a couple of times about how we would do that, but EMAS and Bloom were not compatible at that point.
Sure.
But yeah, I ended up just kind of going along to all of the Bloom events, sponsoring Bloom with my company Icon. And like all of the first Bloom events had Icon's lighting and sound and speakers and stuff like that at it.
Love it.
And then got really involved with Humm because it was a good way of kind of meeting more other people that might be able to join us, getting pitch competition feedback, and meeting people like Cam who knew about marketing that we hadn't met before and that kind of thing.
Yeah, there you go. No, look, I love Bloom. It's an entrepreneurial space for students at UWA and Curtin or around Perth really, and it has spawned a lot of pretty interesting projects. And more than anything, it's an education thing where it shows kids what's possible if you put your mind to doing something a little bit differently.
Yep.
And just it sort of enables them to sow those very early seeds of just starting a venture.
And lets them learn by making mistakes and trying things. And
spot on. I
don't think that yet there have been many, big successful tech companies come out of Bloom, but there are going to be from the people who've learned from Bloom, because there have been a couple of companies that have failed and those people have gone off and done much smarter things as a result. I think we're one of the companies that are doing okay with the stuff that we've learned from Bloom, but you never know. But yeah, the people who've like been part of Bloom have all learned so much. I think that potentially Bloom will be a game changer that people will look back at.
Well, even one of my early startups, Verivote, there were a couple of the co-founders from there that used to spend their time at Bloom, and it was just that sort of space, and it just attracted those sort of people who wanted to build cool shit. So
totally. Yeah, I remember Verivote. Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, Ammo Marketing, we hire out of Bloom. Whenever I've got a new position open, I'll post it up on the Bloom Facebook group, and there'll always be someone that's a gun out of there.
Yeah, we need Bloom to keep growing, and it's going well. Jasmine and the crew over there are killing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So moving on, so you spent a bit of time at Bloom. You're accepted into the +8 Accelerator program here in Perth.
Yep.
And I just remember the demo day, going into the little solder lab downstairs there at Flux, and seeing these contraptions, I don't know how else to describe them, strapped to people's hands. It's an accurate word. So like, what were they, and what were you doing at that point?
We were doing something absolutely insane. We were making what I think is basically like the holy grail of our industry, which is called closed loop brain computer interface. It's where you're simultaneously uploading and downloading information to the brain in a high resolution. We were actually doing it, which is cool, but we were not doing it in a way that it worked, or we had figured out how to do any better than what anyone else had done in labs before. Basically, we went for the hardest possible thing first. And we were downloading electrical brain information into computers, visualizing it, running it through algorithms, determining people's mental states, and then trying to feed back electricity to those people in a way that was customized to their mental states to boost things.
Because I remember having a go at that, and it would show on your screen, assume some sort of form of your brain waves.
Yeah.
And if you concentrated, you could flatten that line out more or less. And then if you were distracted or sound happened, you would start to see the lines bounce around the screen again.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So that was the earliest iteration almost.
That's right. And we were working with computer gamers because they were sitting still, concentrating on a screen, engaging in a task that you could measure how well they were doing. And we were attempting to train this big model of brain electricity data, and then think about how we could actually customize the electrical stimulation in ways that would make those people win the games more often.
So why was it? So they were your very first customers, or what you expected to be your first?
They're actually
types
our
of customers,
second.
were they?
Yeah.
Who were your first customers?
I think like when you start a company, you're very biased to starting it for yourself without even realizing it, right? And so we started our company having just come out of college, or university as we call it here, and just thinking about college students studying and like, oh, if we can make people learn faster, they could learn like the stuff that I just had to learn faster. And you know, when you leave college, you're faced with this, oh shit, I actually don't know much. I have a lot left to learn.
Welcome to the real world.
Yeah, nothing I learned is actually that helpful. I have to learn everything on the job, and so that's what was going through our mind as the most useful application of this technology. The esports thing, the computer gamers, that was an attempt at a smart place to start. Because the thing with college students is there's so many different people with so many different motivations. Money is not free flowing at that time in your life. There's so many competing tools and technologies. Like
they're not just a homogenous group of people. They've all got different motivations.
And it's an immature marketplace as well. So like they typically are a combination of at their mental best and not really needing any extra stuff. We're mixed with just procrastinating and like haven't really figured out how to optimize themselves yet.
And living in squalor and
and like, you know, a lot more can be said for like a college student just not procrastinating and learning how to learn and like keeping their energy levels up with good sleep and exercise and stuff.
And so then the refocus to gamers
is like, where is there somewhere that has a really strong incentive for an improvement, and that we also could collect a lot of data. And the business case was gaming teams and gamers who are like competing at the high level would want this technology to improve them. It was a fantastically complex like year and a half that we were working on that. We built some really interesting technology that we didn't expect to build. We even kind of lived in LA for a little while, and the company was based simultaneously in Berkeley and LA for a little while, working with some of the world's most prestigious gaming teams with like their sports psychologists and a couple of their players to measure mental states of players and then stimulate their brain and then that kind of stuff. But long story short, we decided it wasn't actually the right place for this technology to start.
So I mean, I'm really interested in the customer growth kind of journey, and you know, it's awesome that you identified A, that students weren't your market, B, that we should give the gamers a really good nudge. How are you reaching those gamers early on? What were you? I mean, you didn't really have a product per se. What were you? What was the value proposition?
The first 2.5 years of Humm were research basically. And just testing little prototype versions that we made. So. And then the rest of it was scientific research. So it was this kind of weird research project mixed with something that was trying to do like customer research. And the first work that we did in the first couple of weeks of the +8 Accelerator was just calling hundreds of people and bringing focus groups in and reading different books about how you get information out of people. And just pushing hard to get as much data as we could. And we realized pretty quickly with the students that they were the wrong market for those reasons that I said before, because we were asking them. And
so it was just literally through interviews and just chatting to people, asking them about their problems.
That started with interviews. We hadn't really built anything that we could give anyone yet that was going to take anything less than 15 minutes with a scientist and a programmer to set up. So couldn't really test a product with people at that time. But we were doing some like fundamental neuroscience testing, measuring the brain's electricity and trying to see could we like recognize different things and train the model.
So you went through a year and a half of testing and scientific discovery. Is there anything you would have done differently during that period?
I don't think that we could actually have done anything differently because there was just so much like compulsory learning that there's no other way to do than to learn. And like I think the only alternative would have been just being more experienced with the startup experience. And like potentially just having worked in a couple of different startups and learned some of the skills, like how do you do product management, how do you do being a CTO, how do you run an engineering team, but then also no one had ever really covered the ground that we're covering in terms of is there another way of building this stuff that is different. So no, I don't think we could have done anything differently aside from just kind of like got to the conclusion faster, which you always kind of wish.
But the fact that you'd done that groundwork would have made you, look so much more legitimate to investors and to the market potentially?
For 2 reasons, like quitting our jobs and showing commitment and making sacrifices gave a lot of people confidence. I was quitting a legal career. I was just quitting Macquarie Bank. Tim was quitting a career in the hospital. And that shows commitment. That shows like someone actually believes in this. But then the second thing is, by actually being out there in the market and trying to make a product work, and then also being exposed to lots of mentors and actually showing them that we were listening to them and trying the things that they suggested and stuff like that, people just believed that one day we would come upon a solution. And we did eventually.
You showed that you had skin in the game and you really believed in what you were doing, and it goes a very long way. Yeah,
and like it's hard to tell people advice like you should just do the same and everything will be fine, because it very well may not be. But for us, it worked out.
Yeah, and this is the whole premise actually of this podcast: is everybody's growth journey is different and it's unexpected. You can't guess what's going to work for you. You just need to go through the process and figure it out as you go, and being open to those lessons that the world throws you as you do it. So, so you spent some time trying to make this product work for gamers. It didn't work. You'd made a decision that you were going to change up what you were doing. How did that work? How did that come about?
So I guess along the way, until we made that decision, we continued to just level up our understanding of the problem that we were solving from a scientific perspective and engineering, our understanding of startup in general, and our resources and commitments also continually leveled up. So we started that back at the HBF hackathon. It wasn't even a company. We did the +8 Accelerator. We became a company. At the end of the +8 Accelerator, we took on some angel investment from some people here in Perth and made some commitments to them that we wouldn't waste their money. We quit our jobs. And then after a couple of months of trying that, we got the opportunity to go and be based at UC Berkeley and have some investment from them and become a US company. So there's a lot that just had to be done there. But just then the
process of building a company,
learning and building a company, and getting other people involved that could like help us figure out these problems, and that stuff just had to happen. But by the time that we had this really serious commitment of graduating from Skydeck, UC Berkeley's Accelerator, and needing to show that we were ready to raise a round of investment, we had come to the conclusion that it was going to be too slow in esports, and we were probably going to build a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't want to build, because that's what you find when you work in a market. You don't find, hey, this thing that I came up with in my head is the perfect thing for you. You find out what they want, and we started building all kinds of things that we didn't want to build, but the esports players did want us to build. So, like they wanted us to build like this live platform for visualizing their stress and emotions, and then like informing the coaches, and it became this like pretty cool product that we were pretty proud of having made, and it was novel technology, and we were doing some cool stuff with it, and DARPA and stuff like that were interested in it when we showed it to them.
Wow.
But we just didn't want to be building that stuff, and we put 2 and 2 together with the commercial side of things, where we saw actually this is a kind of smaller market than we thought it was. A lot of the money that is being funneled into it that you hear in the statistics is actually going into entertainment and like sponsorship contracts rather than like player performance. And the rest of the players in the industry are quite casual. They're not super performance oriented.
There's a very small percentage that are actually elite gamers where they care about their stress levels.
And even among those guys, the strategies, like I said, with the students it's an immature industry. It's not like a high performance sport. A lot of it is like just basic stress management, psychology, basic attitude and dietary and sleep and stuff training, and the industry is just really starting to look at being professional. So it wasn't the right industry for us.
Did you feel like you'd come up against a brick wall? What did it feel like?
It felt like we were actually kind of like, what we wanted to build, there was a brick wall to that. Because other things were just too useful for people in the meantime, and they just weren't ready for this like weird brain enhancing technology yet. But we were getting dragged in this other direction of building all kinds of fancy software to do kind of ancillary stuff that is useful for our long-term vision, but not immediately what we wanted to build. And so we just decided to place a arbitrary brick wall and say we're not doing this anymore, which is really tough because, we by that time had raised hundreds of thousands of dollars and had people on board, and some of the people even said, you're pivoting? Like, that's a really big decision. You sure you want to pivot? You told me this esports thing was good, and we were like, well, we've learned that it's the wrong thing to do, and we just got to back ourselves and figure out what the right thing to do is. And that's when it started to get really interesting.
I bet.
Yeah.
Did people respect that decision?
everyone who's ever invested in us has invested in us knowing that they're investing in us, not investing in a sophisticated company or a sophisticated idea. And so we've been lucky to, be able to work with everyone who's ever backed us. And really they've just wanted us to do what we thought was right and always tried to believe in us. Some of them even got to say, "I told you so." Esports they never thought it was the right place.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So where's Humm at now?
So pretty soon after the esports thing, we realized that we had gone through these two versions of the company before, pivoting, where one was the student thing and the next thing was the esports thing.
Yeah.
Both had been just our gut telling us to do it. There were a lot of statistics and reasons that sounded right, and it was easy to put a pitch together that made us convince other people the same, but fundamentally we didn't have the data to say this is the right place for this technology. And so we were like, well, it's going to really suck. This is going to be a hard thing. We're going to spend months more than we want to, but in order to make this decision, we're going to go collect that data rather than just make a decision. And so instead of just making another company with another customer, we spent 6 months basically building prototypes of our product, putting up a website, selling it to hundreds of people, sending them the prototypes, and collecting a lot of data about how they used it and why.
Okay.
And we ended up with this company that we have now where we've done two things. One, we've focused our customer to be white-collar professionals, typically above the age of 25. People who are no longer in that childlike, I can just learn anything easily state, and are looking for anything they can get to put them at the edge, to put them further ahead. And in the later stages of life, 40 to 70, people are starting to notice that their brains don't work as fast as they used to, just that natural aging process. And so those people are one of our big customers.
Yeah. Let's come back to that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested to get into how you sold this product to hundreds of people fairly soon after the pivot, where you had a different direction with the company.
Yep.
And why did you make a decision that you needed to start selling something?
Yeah, it was that thirst for data.
Yeah.
And by that time, we had gone through a couple of the books that everyone reads about how to find out product development decision-making criteria data.
Mm-hmm.
So basically not getting biased information about where you should be putting your technology, how much you should be charging for it, what features you should be incorporating. And one of the things that we had learned was that when you just ask people to try your technology, they're almost always just doing it because they like you.
Yep.
And if you're personable, you'll be able to convince them, and then they'll not give you the truth about whether they love or hate your product. But if you can put something online, make a promise to people click pay, and then have an expectation that the thing that you sold them works, it's a very different relationship.
Sure.
And so we really had to sell things. And the way that we did that selling things, I think the core of it is this process that, there's probably a whole bunch of ways to describe it, but I call it ratcheting. It's about making little bits of progress or zigzagging. You got to kind of build a bit of legitimacy here.
Yep.
You can't really get much further on that point for now, so build some more over there.
Yep.
And so, for example, we would do a clinical trial with our technology where we get an incredible result using some stuff we'd built to improve learning. And then we would show that to the Air Force, and the Air Force would be like, wow, that's incredible. And so all of a sudden you've got one little bit of progress on science.
Yes.
You can't do any more science for now because you don't know what it's for, so what else are we going to do? And then all of a sudden you've got this commercial traction. And then with the Air Force, all of a sudden they want to do a clinical trial. So then you've got this next step on the scientific front. And that's that zigzagging ratchet, continually ratcheting
almost
tighter.
like a parlay. And so, I mean, would you call that that product development process, where you're finding customers really as you develop the product, you're kind of doing marketing really. You're actually using the product development as part of the marketing process, and then you're using the legitimacy that you get from the fact that you've got a customer like the Air Force to go out to show, hey, look guys, these guys trust us, to a wider market, and you're able to sort of level up from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's company discovery. It's like you're doing customer discovery, you're doing scientific discovery, you're doing commercial sales, testing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that's a pre-seed startup trying to find product market fit. It's testing different things until something sticks.
Yeah. And you started having people off the street buying off your website?
We put up a kind of vague website just saying these are the real world implications of the things that we found in this science. And they were, you can focus easier, you can multitask faster and better, you can get less distracted and frustrated, and you may not need to use as many like caffeine stimulants later in the day that keep you awake at night if you're using this technology.
Yeah.
And we just let the people who thought that was interesting buy it.
Okay.
And we did, of course, like go out to conferences and spruik it and like make a little PR announcement with a Air Force thing and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not all organic, just people who found you on the internet and click on it.
Right.
It's got bias inherent in there too. And we had to make some decisions like what's the age of the model that we put on the website with the picture of the product on them.
Yeah.
And those things have bias as well. But while that's all going on, I think we took about 500 paid pre-orders for $40 each. And then within that, we collected a lot of information about who those people were. We stratified everything into cohorts with young people, older people, white-collar jobs, trades, all kinds of different things. And then we shipped them prototypes.
Mm-hmm.
We got them to use the prototypes. We collected information about their expectations, before and after, how much they would pay, what they thought of every session, the things they loved and hated about it, what they were using it for, what they found it useful for, and what they didn't find it useful for. And from all of that data, sitting in our house for 3 months, just staring at it every single day, everything. The first thing we did was an hour-and-a-half meeting where we would call all of these like 50 people we had a month, and just be like, "Did you use the product yesterday? What did you use it for? What do you think?" And like implementing these strategies that you use for getting the right answers and not biasing by presupposing the answers and stuff. We were able to uncover the right customer, and the right applications.
Because what people do and what they say are very often two different things, especially if you know them, and that people don't want to be assholes.
Mm-hmm.
So that having those people at an arm's length that you don't even know giving you that really valuable customer feedback is critical. Yeah.
And customers are very noisy, especially when you don't have a really clear, set, defined product where you're giving them something and saying, "Hey, how do you use it?" You'll get 50 different people tell you 50 different products that you should build, and you've got to make some sense out of that noise. And so we were doing like lots of pie charts and like spreadsheets with like what words are coming up in multiple people's feedback, and then like drawing correlations between them and stuff like that.
And that's how you get focus on the thing that you should be doubling down on, rather than trying to be all things to all people.
I think it's combination of that and vision, and it always has to be, because you can never learn everything you need to learn just by collecting first principles data. You've got to have some kind of driving vision behind it as well.
Sure.
But
especially if you're doing something which you're trying to change the world, and so this is something which, at first glance is a little bit scary and is quite unknown. It's something that people have no experience with.
Very rationally, yeah.
So how do you still get people to get their credit card out of their pocket and buy something like that?
That was a learning process too, right? Like for the first year and a half, I didn't get anyone to pay me anything. A couple of investors were like, "This is an interesting technology. Here's some money to help build it," but no one was like keen to buy it. And we are lucky also that we are sort of standing on the shoulders of giants. We have seen a couple of things work and not work in this industry. This industry being non-invasive, so like outside the skin, not brain surgery, neurostimulation, so changing electrical currents in the brain. There had been a couple of products, medical, non-medical, and even lately in the last 10 years, 2 or 3 good consumer products, which haven't really gone that far, but they've shown that people would pay for this stuff and that there are applications that people find are useful for in the real world.
Yeah.
So we were able to kind of learn from watching those companies develop, as well as our own constant pitching to people this technology and our own testing of the technology with people, enough that we were able to kind of explain it in a way, brand it in a way, and build it in a way that people would actually be prepared to pay for it.
Yeah, and you've proven that with how many sales so far?
We closed it off at the end of last year at 1,000 people, and it started at...
That's significant, right? That's not just that's not just a flash.
It's kind of like a Kickstarter level of support, right?
Yeah.
Where most of those people have tried something or seen something, but not very many people have like done a couple of months worth of testing. A lot of those people have different ideas about what our product is. It's an interesting thing. But yeah, the first 500 people were $40 US, and then by the end we were getting people pay $300, $400.
Yeah, for a series of and you've chosen a really difficult type of product to create. It's a physical product. Everyone always warns against early stage startups getting into physical products.
Hardware is hard.
Hardware is hard.
Heard that about 50,000 times.
Why is it? What makes it so hard compared to just creating a bit of software or an app or a SaaS?
I think both are hard in different ways. I would say that I think hardware is a bit harder, but that's probably rich coming from a hardware startup founder. I think the thing that makes hardware hard is that it's concrete. It can't be just quickly edited. And so that iteration process that you can go through with software, where you learn so fast and you adapt the product to the learning as quickly as you're getting that information.
Live feedback on user
behavior. It's not possible with hardware. You've got to make forward commitments and spend money up front to make the thing. And then small changes or small mistakes can have massive long-term implications.
Right.
And so, for example, when you order like a circuit board in, it takes 3 weeks for that circuit board from first someone clicking on a screen and making that circuit board in concept to it being shipped to you. Along the way, you've probably spent a couple $100. You've bought into lots of non-recoverable engineering time, stuff that you just had to go and figure out what components to do, and you've had to pay the person who's doing that and stuff like that. So there's a lot of upfront costs, there's a lot of upfront time commitments, and it's just slower and harder to learn.
Big time.
Yeah,
that makes perfect sense. The Humm product is... we've got one here in front of us.
We do.
So it is... Talk us through what we've got here.
Yeah, so this is one of the prototypes that the Air Force in the US have been testing in their academies. For the moment, just kind of building towards a formal clinical trial, not actually doing a clinical trial yet.
So you're peeling off a sticker?
Yeah. So what I just did was basically inspired by the Band-Aid, right? How could we take this technology, which previously had been these kind of octopus-looking wires out there, sweat sponges, and hundreds of dollars each, and turn it into something that was easy for people to understand, easy for people to use, and not intimidating in any way. So we came to the conclusion that it needed to be as easy to peel as a Band-Aid, or as easy to get ready, as quick as, just a sticker, put it on, and then to turn it on or to use it, and this is just a prototype, just a simple one step.
Thinking a switch.
The idea, we're trying to go for just a 3-step process.
Yes.
So I've got it on now.
Very consumer friendly.
Within 2 minutes of having pressed the button that I just did, I'm going to start to experience the full effects of the technology.
Yep.
And then after those 15 minutes, I'm going to be able to take it off. 15 minutes being the duration of time you should wear it to get the full effects for the longest period of time.
Okay.
About an hour and a half at least.
Yeah.
And that's done. And that's how you turn something that's was scary and hard to use and expensive and make it something cheap and easy and not intimidating. I mean, it's about as scary as a sticker.
Yeah. And what would your response be to people who say this sounds like a scam, or it sounds like snake oil, or it doesn't look safe? What's the response there?
I get a lot of people say that.
Yeah.
I think that was my first reaction to it too, right?
Sure.
That time that I was sitting in there and I had the magnet put on my head and my arms and legs started showing. That was when it became oh shit, this can actually do something. So most people have never really encountered this technology. 99.9% of people just don't have a clue about it. And often people's only interaction with brain electricity will have been they've seen the electric chair in a movie, or they'll have heard some random bracelet that baseball players use that alters their magnetic field and makes them play baseball better, but is actually bullshit. Wow. So my initial reaction, internally as an entrepreneur, it's frustration, right? You're oh God, another person saying it's not real, even though I spent 3 years working on it and stuff. Yeah. But that's a natural reaction, but just as natural as their reaction. I think it's super rational when someone says, hey, I have this magic product that you can put a Band-Aid on your head and it makes your brain work faster, is to be that's bullshit, and it's on us to prove it.
But this is going to be the key, I believe, for your growth and for the future acceptance of your product, that it's a little bit like whenever something new comes out and it's a little bit scary, a little bit edgy. I mean, think about Uber, about 10 years ago. No one would have ever imagined that you could summon a stranger in a car with your mobile phone and you would get in it. You wouldn't exchange cash and you wouldn't get axe murdered before you arrived in your destination. It just sounded insane at the time, and no one thought that it would work.
I don't think it was even that hard to build Uber, to make the app that had GPS involved and do all of the technology required to make people be able to press a button and a car rocks up. That's not hard.
Well, they actually paid black car drivers in San Francisco full time to sit around and wait to be summoned. So the two-sided marketplace thing didn't even come into play until later. But what really unlocked their growth was when other people, when early customers started arriving, in a nice black car, and someone was like, "Whoa, you got your own driver?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, no, it's my Uber." "Oh, what?" And you just summons it with your phone, and the stranger in the car doesn't murder you with an axe. This is amazing. And so it was that proof, that social proof.
Education and social proof. Yeah.
And there's nothing more powerful in marketing, really, than a third-party endorsement from somebody.
And that's what Humm's next 3 years look like.
Okay.
Like I said, this technology has had a couple of people try it. We're not the first people to ever try this.
Yeah.
Thank God, because we've learnt a lot from watching the other people do that. But this is like the internet in the 1990s. People have no idea how to use this stuff yet.
Yeah.
People don't even know that it exists. So the first thing we're doing is we're educating people, and for that reason, we've made the most unintimidating, easy-to-use product possible.
You've got to create a web browser in order for people to interface with the internet.
Yeah, you've got to give people the capacity to... You've got to lower the barrier to entry enough that people can even try it.
Yeah.
Then once people try it, you've got to get them continually educated. So we need people to use these for the right things. They need to use them for like learning time or focus time rather than just like cooking their dinner.
Yeah.
I say cooking your dinner because we've had people use it for cooking their dinner and they're like, doesn't work, doesn't do anything. And I'm like, well, it's not really being used to cook your dinner.
So what is the ideal use case, do you think?
So this product here, this bit of science that we've adapted into this patch is a product that boosts something called your working memory.
Yep.
And so anyone who knows how a computer works, it's kind of the same thing as a RAM of a computer. It's a very close analogy.
So it's like the temporary bit of information that gets stored while you're doing something with that information while it's being stored in the RAM.
So this is how memory works. So information just exists in the world. Your senses pick it up and can process a certain amount of it. You can kind of pay attention to a couple of things at once. You can pay attention to the fact the colour of the lights in here, the sound that's going on, but you can only really pay attention to so much at once, and that's kind of the bandwidth that you have. An even smaller part of that bandwidth actually ends up in something called your working memory, like the RAM of a computer.
Yeah. It's
the part that you can actually kind of interact with. It's a small amount of high resolution information, and it can be represented in a couple of different ways. It can be represented as like a list of digits that you can remember. It can be represented in like a picture that you can remember what it looks like.
Okay.
That information sits there for a second, for a very short period of time. And we call that everything from working memory to short-term memory and a whole bunch of other names. And then stuff ends up in your stored memory, your long-term memory.
Yeah.
And then there's this bounce back. It goes forwards and backwards between those two. So you can recall stuff from your long-term memory
like
into your working
drive.
memory.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what we do is we just increase the size of that working memory, increase the number of digits you can hold or the complexity of the picture you can remember.
By how much?
In our clinical study with one test, which is called the reverse Causey block test, which is this kind of universally accepted test in neuroscience for this thing called visual spatial working memory, which is the orientation, placement, and amount of information you can hold in your working memory by a pretty incredible 20%.
Wow.
So it's like giving your computer 20% more RAM. It's going to go much faster.
Yep.
And if you're trying to save a whole bunch of stuff off a USB or like read a book and save it in your memory, it's going to be exponentially faster actually, because you can absorb not just 20% more information at once, but that 20% that you've absorbed faster can then be used to learn how to absorb more information faster. And so it becomes this compound interest bank account effect.
Well, it's exponential.
Yeah.
That is extraordinary. So if I could normally remember 10 numbers, then through using the Humm, I would then, in theory, be able to memorize 12. Is that right?
Yeah, well, actually, specifically, we've done that test.
Okay.
And most people on average can remember about 5 digits in their memory.
Yep.
Or in our reverse Causey block test, 5 flashed blocks on an order randomized on a screen. But with our device, we can bring people up to about 5.5 set to about 6.5 to 7.
Okay.
Which doesn't sound like much. It's like I can remember a couple more digits.
Yep.
But in the context of what that means for you sit down, you're trying to learn something new, that means that 20% more can kind of make its way into your long-term memory. It means you can pick up skills exponentially faster.
Well, a 20% change in score. I mean, I'm not saying that this is exactly what's going to happen, but a 20% change in score on, say, a university paper is a big difference.
One of these neuroscientists, it's not quite that neat, that translation, but it's a good analogy.
Sure.
One of the neuroscientists we work with in Berkeley, Dr. Vivienne Ming, she's quite a famous expert on learning, and she does an interesting body of work to do with like how AI can be trained to mimic human consciousness, but that's a side point. Whoa. The stuff that she does with us is looking at like what is working memory, why is it important, and how if we change it, what are the implications of that. She's gone and done some pretty interesting stuff calculating what a 20% improvement in working memory looks like, and it's something like a $60,000 increase in annual wage.
Yikes.
It's something like the difference between someone who doesn't finish high school all of a sudden finishing high school. It's something like the difference between, in some cases, someone being the CEO of a 10-person company to going to like a 200-person company in terms of skills. She's got this fascinating body of work that you can read and we can link maybe, but it's actually really meaningful. It's a better predictor, working memory, of your success and happiness in life than IQ. It's a stronger correlation. So
the potential for this is just so exciting for the potential future of humanity, really.
Yep.
This whole field of neuroscience is we're only just beginning to really understand.
Yep.
Well, not even
Totally.
even that, right? So
and this is patch V1, and there's so much more that can be done.
Yeah.
To do with improving your quality of sleep, changing your stress reactions, and even some crazier stuff like potentially curing Alzheimer's. This technology is the gateway to changing our brains. For the first time in humanity's history.
We live in very exciting times. What else are the plans for the future of Humm of the next year or 5 years?
So we've chosen the slow path intentionally of really education focus and usability focus. And so for that reason, we're not starting today making any of that fancy technology that I said we started the company doing. That stuff's in our patents. That's on our like long-term development journey. But really 99.9% of people haven't met this technology yet. The barrier to entry is so hard. We're just focused on that for a couple of years.
Yep. We're
going to be building iterations of this product and other versions that maybe do different cognitive functions than working memory, like concentration and stuff. But it's going to be slow and steady for a couple of years. Doesn't mean it's not going to be really exciting and grow really fast. A lot of people are really excited to use this, a lot of big organizations as well as individuals. But it's going to be a couple of years before we really start doing the crazy stuff. But the crazy stuff is why we're here.
It's still just the nature of being in the hardware business. If this was software, as you say, it could be a little bit different.
Even when people love a hardware product, it's still so likely to fail. You've got to be so careful and so smart. Like a lot of people will use the example of the Jawbone watch.
Oh, yeah.
It's this watch that started on Kickstarter. Tens of thousands of people wanted it. Tens of thousands of people bought their V1, their V2, and then their V3 just had logistics problems, and they just didn't manage their money as well. They had an error in the circuit board. Company failed. And that was a company that kind of preceded the Apple Watch and Fitbit in terms of wearable biometric electronics.
Yeah, and that would have been at least 10 years ago now, the Jawbone. So and the Apple Watch and things are only just
you need
really
to be slow and steady and smart. You can't just make Facebook overnight. It's just hardware is a different ball game.
Yep.
But yeah,
it'll happen soon enough. One big piece of advice to people just starting out, where you were maybe 5 years ago, what would you say to them for founders looking to grow?
Yeah, I think the thing that's been most determinative of our success so far, of Humm having actually managed to achieve some of the crazy stuff that it set out to do, has been that coachability thing, that thing of like constantly seeking mentors, constantly seeking smarter people in yourself. You really are a product of the 5 people you surround yourself with. We hear that kind of thing.
Yep.
And also it takes thousands of hours of learning to get anywhere.
Yep.
So you put those 2 bits of information together, you really just got to be constantly surrounding yourself with people that you can learn from. And it doesn't often actually make a lot of sense why you would be reaching out to like the head of growth at like Facebook or something like that and saying, hey, I have this crazy brain science idea, but can we chat so I can learn from you? But you've got to do it. Because unless you're talking to the people who know enough to help you through the problems that are coming tomorrow, you're not going to be ready for the problems tomorrow. And the thing with startups is and just like if you're a person who's ambitious, the thing with doing anything hard and that people haven't done before is you've got to constantly be thinking tomorrow and evolving. And so I think people who like don't involve other people's opinions, don't seek mentors, don't seek coaching, and don't listen to the coaching they get, actually put themselves at a severe disadvantage because they don't give themselves the opportunity to be better.
Yeah. So be as open as possible to learning and seek out as many mentors and
I think just
advisors
be vulnerable, like accept that it's what you're doing is not always going to make sense but you have to reach out to people and ask for their opinions and get their advice.
Yeah.
The people that I back, having now seen like hundreds of startups through the +8 ecosystem, Australia in general, and then Berkeley and Silicon Valley now in general as well, are people who have hustle. Because if you see someone who's really smart and they've got a really smart idea, you can probably be like, that may work.
Yeah.
But if you see someone who's really smart, has a really smart idea, and will do anything they can to learn how to make that idea real and possible and execute on it, just by constantly pushing it out and getting feedback and changing it and pushing it out again, then you know someone's going to succeed. Yeah. And that was the thing I had to learn. And I think is like counterintuitive to a lot of people when they're first starting, especially here in Perth, where the attitude is kind of like, be careful, don't tell your idea to someone else because then they'll know your idea. You've got to flip that up on its head. Yeah. You've got to, like, people will tell you, why are you talking to that person? You don't know what you're talking about. Why would you talk to them? They don't know really close to what you're doing. But you got to do it. Yeah. And this
boils down to just the importance of focus as well. And it's almost like, what you're building here with Humm is that it's the ability to focus and be tenacious and just keep going. With the eye on what you want to achieve. Yeah. That is a massive indicator of success for a lot of people. Yeah. And there's just so many people who are easily distracted, or they're going to go on to the next shiny thing, and they don't have that ability to stay on the path. Yeah. That unfortunately are just not going to be successful.
Well, it's complicated because you also need to just be constantly trying new things and trying. Yeah, yeah. And just like also just being resilient enough to stick through it changing often.
Resilience is massive. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think my number one bit of advice for people who would be 5 years back would be push yourself to learn as fast as possible.
It's all a learning process.
And the best way to do that is to talk to people who've done it before, smarter people than you.
Awesome. Thanks, mate. Show and tell time. Something we always do on Weird Growth is you would love to hear what tool or gadget or app that you're really enjoying using that's making your life better or your work better. Huh. Do you have anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, interesting. It's not the least embarrassing thing I could say, but I guess I'll say it. I have been using this app called Noom. I don't know if you guys have heard of that app. No. Noom it's like a weight loss app, but it's not like a MyFitnessPal log your meals kind of thing. It's a psychology app. Okay. And it's built on neuroscience and psychological principles for like reinforcing positive habits and like it's powered by all these just body of studies about how things have worked and not worked for people trying to lose weight and be healthier. And wow, I've been doing that for like 6 weeks now, and I've lost like 5 kilos. So,
mate, well done.
Thanks. It's great. That's an app that I'm using right now. That I'm finding pretty helpful.
NOOM.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so does it just help you have a bit of a dopamine hit every time you do,
it just does like really common sense stuff, but it keeps you on a schedule. It does the standard, meal tracking, calorie tracking stuff, but then it also introduces little smart tips like don't think about the things that you're trying to avoid, think about the things you're trying to add to your diet, like think about all the positive stuff that you want to do rather than trying to avoid the negative stuff. And lots of the other things like that sound super common sense, but it's built into a regime that's powered by consistent presentation of data-based, evidence-based strategies.
Sounds great.
I like that.
Check it out. Now, it would be remiss of me if we didn't wind up by asking about Japan.
Oh, yeah.
Why are you famous in Japan, Iain McIntyre? What will people find if they Google Iain McIntyre Japan?
Well, they'll find a couple of things at this point. There's been a couple of things along the journey. My mum's less proud of this. On New Year's Eve in 2016, I think it was, I was stranded out on a pub crawl with food poisoning with a mate of mine, and in Japan, people love it when you get into their like cultural traditions. Yeah. And one of the cultural traditions in Osaka is whenever something like big happens, people just get excited and jump off this bridge into this river. And on New Year's Eve, I decided to do the Australian thing and scull a beer and crush the beer on my head. Neuroscience company founder.
Love it.
And jump into the canal, and it made a bit of a splash in the international headlines. So I'll never be able to escape that one.
That's gold, mate. Once it's on the internet, it's there forever. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you so much for coming on Weird Growth, mate. It's really nice of you to give up some of your limited time here in Perth to do that. Really appreciate it. And we can't wait to see what the future holds. You know, it's very, very exciting for the future of humanity, the stuff that you guys are doing. So please,
I tell you what, there's cool stuff happening in Perth now too, right? Like,
it is.
Being at Bloom a couple of days ago, judging one of the new competitions that they've started, it's like social launchpad thing. Some of the young people, 18-year-old, coming out of school, going into college, I'm like, wow, they're thinking like I was when I was 24, you know? Like,
yeah,
Perth has got an exciting future. We just need to keep backing people to do these cool things and give them the support and encouragement that I got.
Yeah.
And people like me need to have a responsibility, and the other people you're doing in your podcast, to come back and help those people and keep building those opportunities. And it'll be good for us too, because the better Perth does, the better we all do.
We just need to keep, sharing those stories. And, I think that it's really just a narrative thing. If people believe that they can do it, then they're going to make it happen. So. I
remember when I was 18, and the idea of Steve Jobs and entrepreneurship was just like, oh, that's this thing that happens in California, right?
Yeah.
But it's not. Everyone has the capability to do what they want to do. We just need to share the information, show that Humm can succeed, and then other people will be inspired. You do an important work. Well said.
Well, mate, we're looking forward to having you back on in the future to share the future successes of Humm. So thank you so much, Iain, from Humm. If anyone wants to find out more about Humm, where do they go?
www.thinkhum.com.
Yep.
And actually, you can sign up to be on our mailing list of the first people who will get notified or be able to be involved in the testing when we launch our product, or just generally, hear more about the work that we've done and how it's not magic or fake.
Yeah, check out the science. Thanks, Iain. Appreciate it. Well, that's all from for Weird Growth, another podcast episode. Thank you so much. I'm Cam Sinclair from Ammo Marketing. Thank you. Goodbye.
See you later, guys.